Okay, today we're going to be working on the technical part about making the graphs for your statistical experiment. We start off with our data. Again, we have it in a Google Sheet. I started off with making the change column. You can do it in NZGrapher as well, but I find it's just easier to do it here in the original spreadsheet. Okay. When you go to your file, when I go to my file, I will give it a name just so I can find it a little bit easier. We'll call this effects of exercise. In this one, people were asked to do math questions before, while they were at rest, and then they did some exercise and then tried the math questions again. And was looking for an effect. Did the exercise actually help? Okay, so I've got a title, make it a little bit easier to find. So for file, you want to download this, and all of our files have to be downloaded as a CSV file if we want to put it into NZGrapher. It's going to be the same thing when we have Insight later on in year 13. So download it as that. We see it's here in our downloads, ready to use. Okay, so now we can go to NZGrapher. NZGrapher. Okay, using NZGrapher. And for our data, we'll open the file. And again, it should be just in our downloads. Effects of exercise. Right there. Okay. Now again, if you didn't put in the change column before in your spreadsheet, you can just go to column and then add column and it'll give you one. And then you can just type in the numbers. Okay. Remember that the top one is always the title. Now the first graph we're going to do is the box and whisker graph. The box and whisker graph is only about the changes. It doesn't include, it won't include the others. Okay. It doesn't include the before and after. It's just the changes. So we go to graph type. We want a dot plot and box and whisker. We click on the box plot. Okay, as well. Now for the numerical one, again, we're only going to put in numerical one, and that'll be the changes. Okay, now again, if you didn't see the box and whisker come up, it just means you didn't click this part here. Now we should change the title so that it actually shows what we're talking about. So again, we'll call this effects of exercise. Okay, now you type it down here, which is great, but we notice it didn't actually change the title. Remember, if you're going to change something, you have to save changes. This is the same as if you added a new column. You have to save changes to actually be able to use it. Okay, so now it's there. We like that. We're going to right click, copy image, and then insert that into our file that we're using. Okay, I'll insert that. So paste, and there's our graph ready to go. Now we also want to put our raw data in. It's a little bit easier for us to read, but that's also good to do. So we'll go back to our file. Okay, go back to here. And either you can copy it from here, or I'll go back to my original file that I made, this Google Sheet one, which is usually where I get it. So I get it from there. I left click and hold to highlight everything. Right click, copy, and then I'll put that in my document. Okay, on the top. And that's ready to go. And again, you can write above it and below it later on. Just move this down a little bit. Okay. The next graph that we'll need to have is our arrow graph. Okay. Go back. So when we do the arrow graph, the important thing about the arrow graph is the first numerical value, which will end up being on the top here, is our before one. So when we change the graph, now most people will need to scroll down, even on this computer. See, I don't see arrow graph. It's just down a little bit further. and paired dot and arrows graph. Click on that. Now we also have to click on arrows and take off the box plot. Okay. Now again, the first numerical value is what happened before we did the experiment, before you did whatever treatment you were doing, in this case doing exercise. And then the second one is the effect afterwards, after we've done it. Okay, so before should end up at the top, and then after is on the bottom. And again, that's where the arrows are pointing as well. You went from this original state to that. Okay. Now again, we right click, copy the image, go back to our document, and paste it in. Okay, and that's ready to go. Now, you will have to read this graph, and we'll talk about the actual analysis in the next video. But when we're looking at it, we noticed that we had 20 people, but if I actually counted the number of arrows here, I wouldn't be able to count 20. That's because NZGrapher tends to overlap. Well, it'll overlap ones. And it kind of shows you that by making these darker lines. See, this line here is much darker than that one. That means it was some kind of double up. And this one here is just a little bit darker, which means probably 2 arrows. Either way, it's quite hard to tell if this is 2 or if that's 3. So when I actually do my analysis of this, and I'm counting up positive and negative changes, I always go back to the data. Just look at the changes. Positive means an arrow went to the right, a positive number. Negative, like this -2, means it went to the left 2, it went back. And 0 means there was no change. So on my graph, no change should show up as straight up and down. So that was at 14, so that's this one, no change. But again, it is difficult to see sometimes, especially depending on your computer. It might be difficult to tell what's darker and how much darker. So just go back here and do all your counts from there. Okay. On the next video, we're going to talk about the analysis of this.